podcast. This is the Primer Edition. I'm here with Corey Keeps. Corey, I'm going to ask you just to introduce yourself real quick, talk about your Madden experience, what brought you here, and just so far what your experience or opinions are on SML Primer. Appreciate you coming on.
Hi, hello, SML faithful and Primer guys. I've my Madden journey kind of started in Madden 18. Wanted to get more involved in the online franchise. Hadn't played Madden much of just head-to-head. So just kind of really enjoy the online franchise experience and how you can kind of just create your own dynasty, for lack of a better word. Just got to the SML after running 2 leagues in both Madden 18, 19, and then 20, and then kind of fell out of those leagues with just a time schedule. But now with the coronavirus, I have a lot more time to, be in a league like the Primer, and hopefully one day in the SML.
It definitely helps to cut your time down a little bit, or if time frees up for Madden, that's for sure. We'll talk about our first topic, which is going to be the SML Primer playoffs. You seem pretty well versed on what's going on. I'll touch briefly on what happened in the wild card. It looks like the Redskins went in 28-16 against the Cardinals, which is you. I'll let you break down that game here in just a second. We had the Chargers over the Chiefs, 30-16. The Jets over the Titans, 31-20. And a blowout win for the Saints, 44-7 over the Lawyer Killers Falcons. Lawyer, I don't know what happened to you, dude, but you definitely choked in the playoffs. Go ahead, and we'll turn it over to Corey here for a little bit more in-depth analysis of the Primer playoffs.
All right, so starting off with my game with Redskins, pretty much the front seven just dominated for the Redskins, able to consistently get 6-7 yards a pop. Really nothing I could do formation-wise. And then 2 enforcer hit sticks, turnovers, kind of just sealed the deal towards the end. And then as far as the rest of the games, Saints are one of the hottest teams in the league, rallied off about 8 straight to close the regular season, had the win to get in against the Rams week 17. And he rolls against Lawyer Killer, and what I had him actually penciled in Lawyer to make a deep run. So to see him get blown out was pretty surprising.
And I don't have anything for the divisional round. Daddy Leagues isn't loading it, so if you would, let's go ahead and take that for me.
Okay, so divisional round we have Grams. He faced against the Jets, and penciled him to go pretty much all the way through. He beat the Ravens beat the Jets 35-10, pretty much dominated from pillar to post. The Saints, in another riding an all-time heater here, he upset the number 1 seed, the Seattle Seahawks, 20-16, with a game-winning interception, with the Seahawks driving late. And then Mike got blown out. Redskins over the Bears, 55-0. Not much to say there. Better luck next year, Mike. And then we are waiting for the Chargers and the Jaguars to play. They're playing tomorrow afternoon for that. Expecting the Jags to roll, 14-2. I think the Chargers' luck is about to run out. Having Daniel Jones as your quarterback, and unfortunately with Melvin Gordon being out for another 2 weeks, looking like the Jags will advance. Having Van Der Esch come back this past week, riding at full strength despite Teddy Bridgewater being out. He's going to win on defense and just possession alone.
Okay. Yeah, the Jags is definitely a dangerous team to play. I'm sure they blew me out when I played them this season, so definitely a good team. Chargers, I'm familiar with King Koopa or Mr. October. Pretty well-balanced player. I had a lot of good games against him. I believe it was last cycle where he was the 49ers or I was the Rams. I don't recall, but we were in the same division at one point in time. He's a tough player. It's be interesting to see who does take the cake on that one. And then, as you mentioned, kind of in pre-production, the Redskins kind of had a change of the guard. Basically, that team was already 8-9 or 10-win team when they switched owners, and you kind of mentioned that they had a superstar or X Factor receiving back, and it's kind of odd. So it'll be interesting. How good are the Redskins? We don't know. The sample size is kind of small. I'm kind of pulling for October just because he's more or less one of the only names that's left in there. Did you say that the Ravens won, or did they lose in the divisional round?
The Ravens did win. The Ravens
Ravens
beat
did win.
the Jags. I did it looked like Mike played. I was using Mike's game against the Redskins. He did play the new after the turnover. I played the Redskins facing their last game with the prior owner. He was a 10-2 team at the time, and I beat him, and I think he left a week or so later. So I was watching the tape. You know, that's what I used to scout him, was his game against Mike, and Mike beat him. No, it was a shock to see Mike get blown out like this, 55-0. But no, sometimes things snowball in that, and you just kind of get a negative streak, and you can't come out of it.
And just real quick, the Ravens Grams is obviously another experienced SML member. Him, Mike, and Lawyer Killer. So I'm not surprised to see Graham's doing well. So there's a good chance that he takes the Primer Bowl this year. We'll move on to the next topic. We're going to talk with just some brief stats. We'll go over your league leaders. Right now, it looks like your offensive leaders in passing. Patrick Mahomes is leading passing yards wise with 4,234 touchdowns. And the running game, it always comes back to the hashtag YPass, and a lot of guys are about that. In real life, to get 2,000 yards rushing is kind of a rare thing. But in Miami, for Demarius Riddle, he ripped off 2,634 yards and 25 touchdowns. That's pretty impressive. And then when you look at the Redskins, which I think he had a lot of these stats, that the former owner was a really strong running team, was very run-focused. Valverio Jones with 2,048 yards and 22 touchdowns. A lot of running here in the Primer. If you look at the receiving leaders, it's more or less a little bit more balanced. Amari Cooper, 1,400 yards, 16 touchdowns. Marquise Brown, or Hollywood Brown, 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns. Diamond Cooks, which I think that's the Dolphins receiver.
That's actually the Chiefs.
Is that the Chiefs?
Yeah, the Chiefs. The Chiefs had an injury to Tyreek Hill early on in the season, so Cook kind of stepped up, was the number one option. So with Mahomes, throwing the ball, it was pretty easy to make some catches.
Okay, so the not so good stats here. I was in the top 3 for interceptions thrown this year. I threw 31 interceptions to Sam Darnold. I was not the worst though. I believe Lawyer Killer threw 34, and Jimmy G with 42 led the league. So congratulations to the 49ers. I'm not sure if we had a change. Has the 49ers changed a lot this season?
The 49ers, that's a apocalypse performance.
That was Coop. God bless him for that. Coop's just a little too old to be playing Madden at this point. When you're 90 years old and just geriatric as hell, it doesn't work out for you. But not seeing the massive sack numbers here in the Primer like we do the SML. Like, it's still a lot, but in comparison, like the SML, where you a lot of times have guys with 30, 40 plus sacks a season, this is almost half-assed realistic with Garrett and Donald both with 20. Not even realistic at that, but better. Garrett and Donald with 26 each, Mac with 24, Sweat with 24, and Daniel Hunter with 23. And then interceptions, we don't have Oshie in this league, so you don't have Roquan Smith with 40 interceptions. You got Kendall Fuller with 12 and 11 and 10 for there. Do the stats seem somewhat realistic to you, somewhat consistent what you've seen in other leagues, or what do you think about the stats from this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think the stats kind of bear out. It's very difficult in a league to balance user-generated errors. Like, so when you have users who just will hold the ball and have 7-step drops every play,
right?
And people who just tunnel a receiver, and you can easily pick them off 6 times a game. And then you get a guy like Oshie, and you get him in a division with somebody who is that kind of player, and you just kind of rack up the stats that make awards impossible to combat when you get an owner who just can dominate the awards year after year.
We'll move on. You kind of mentioned in the pre-production, you'd asked the question what my philosophy was being in multiple leagues, if it changes. And to be honest with you, I don't even really get to fulfill any type of philosophy. I miss almost every offseason in any league I've been. I actually picked up a 3rd league, and I dropped them already. Wasn't impressed with the way that they trashed each other on Twitter, that they complained about like their complaints that we would talk about in DM is on Twitter, their gameplay was not satisfactory in any way, shape, or form. So I went ahead and I'm back down to 2. But I even missed the offseason in that league. So I missed the offseason almost every league I'm in just because of work and training and everything that's going on. So I never really get to have a team building philosophy or anything like that. My goal is obviously to make the draft. I think that's anyone's goal, is to build through the draft and kind of make the tough decisions on what contracts. Like Prime, a lot of times he'll let really good guys walk or trade them. More or less for him is to trade them to go honey dick somebody for a first round pick and to continue to advance his team like that. So I never really get to do that. What's generally your philosophy when it comes to building your team?
I mean, I've always usually trying to find what the zig is.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone will go after big name free agents and overspend.
Right.
And I've always tried to be cheap on positions that you can manually alter. So when you have combine hero wide receivers, you can force feed them the ball to you can get a 7th rounder and make them into that X factor, as opposed to spending $20 million a year on some free agent that might get you the reward today, but you might be able to get a $2 million a year contract for the whole cycle of the franchise for a 7th round draft pick. It might take you a season or 2 to develop them, but you'll be able to have a very cheap
Option
roster spot filled franchise star for dirt cheap because you developed them to the draft. Now it's a little more difficult with O-line in quarterback, where you kind of just roll the dice whether or not you get a star dev O-lineman, where you get a hit, you get lucky and get a star O-lineman to the draft. That's where maybe paying someone in free agency is a little more valuable. But I did want to ask you a little sidebar here. What is your philosophy on what's the threshold of how many leagues you like to be in? Is it 2, 3? Do you see any diminishing returns when you go to 3 leagues versus 2?
It's always been, I've always just done 1 league just because, to me, I don't know, you just can't really dedicate the time you need to in terms of making sure that you fulfill that. At least for me anyway, I don't have time to be with all the drafts and to keep up with all the advances, especially if it's not at least with these 2 leagues, I know the rules are the same, so I don't have to worry about pausing the game and checking the rule book and things of that nature. The advanced schedule is the same, so I can do the 2 leagues if I do it this way. The issue I ran into with the other league was I literally had to pause it. I didn't know the 4th down rules. The 4th down rules are more strict compared to what we are. So that was kind of difficult. The goal was to get better at playing Madden, and that wasn't happening because I don't think it's so much that my skill sucks. I think it's just that this game is so random that no matter how many games you play, that there's a lot of it that is out of your control at this point. I don't feel like I'm that bad of a player. I just think that I can't advance my team beyond what it is because I do miss a lot of the off season. And then a lot of bad shit happens. But also, I kind of suck at times, so that doesn't help either.
Now, when you're in multiple leagues, do you like to choose a similar template and pick 2 developing teams, or do you like to have 1 win now roster, like a Cowboys, an Eagles, a Ravens, and then another team like a Lions, where you have to develop it in another league to give you 2 different views? Or what's your philosophy on that, choosing a team when you start a cycle?
To start a cycle, I try to pick the best team that I can. Definitely want someone that's got weapons, someone that's preferably not going to be in major cap issues or have a lot of guys that are terribly old. I like to have guys that have a few nice pieces to send around. Like this year, not going into the newest cycle, but if you were picking the Bucks for Madden 20, you'd have Mike Evans, you would have Jones, the running back, you'd have some good players on defense. You would just have to get LASIK for Jameis Winston or find a better quarterback option and kind of shore up a few things like the pass rush, defensive tackles we mentioned in pre-production with VRV. And so I've been the Rams in the past. I've been the Seahawks in the past. I think I've dabbled here and there with the Browns and the Vikings, but I never really picked the Cowboys and never really had that option. They always go before I pick. But to me, I guess I would kind of like to have that roster that's pretty much in place because I do miss a lot of the drafts and the team building opportunities. I don't know if I lost you.
No, we're good. I mean, personally, I pick teams. I like to put my name on it. Teams that in real life you won't see in the playoffs. So I picked the Dolphins, the Bucks, and then as Bucks only downside is you do have to pay for LASIK. If you don't have the insurance, you got to trade Jameis.
Yeah.
Year one, and draft a rookie. But teams that I just find it more boring in a franchise situation to pick the Cowboys, where year one you're Super Bowl hunting, and then you get into those issues of having to trade players that you really don't want to, and to recoup assets and get rid of their star alignment.
Right.
I like to just kind of build it from scratch. You see a Jets or a Bucks or a Dolphins in the playoffs. That owner is either really good or
a good team builder.
Good team builder, or he's just playing with dirt and he's making something out of nothing.
One last topic we're going to hit on, and we're going to try to keep this 20 minutes or less today. Who is the worst division in the primer? And I've got a few divisions I'm looking at. Obviously, the NFC North, where you look at Mike FML, 12-4. After that, starts to go downhill. Which Lawyer Killer 7-9 is not. He's not a bad player whatsoever. Or excuse me, he's not the Packers. I'm sorry, I don't think he's the Packers in the SML. You got the Packers at 7-9, the Vikings 4-12, and the Lions at 2-14. The only other division I was looking at that was not very good, and now of course I can't remember.
Yeah, we can't sleep on the AFC North. I mean, it's Grams by a mile, and then it's everyone else, and you don't know if that's purely just Grams, just kind of big brother in his division.
Right.
But there's no hope for a wild card berth out of any of these teams anytime soon.
No.
Grams kind of just holding them down as a little knuckle sandwich to all his AFC North brethren.
That's honestly the other division I was looking at, just because everything's so skewed. There's not another double-digit team in there. There's not even, like, the worst teams are both 5-11, 7-9. You don't even have another team that's 8-8 or better. Whereas you look at the NFC South, the Falcons 12-4, the Saints 10-6, the Panthers and Bucks 8-8. I would argue that the NFC South is one of the toughest divisions in the primer. What are your takes on the weakest and toughest divisions in the primer?
I think ultimately it's the NFC North is got to be the weakest division, and I think the NFC South and the NFC West, which is my division, are the strongest divisions in the primer. We'll see how the new Seahawks owner is going to shake out, but the NFC South, I mean, doesn't have a team with a losing record. Down to the week 16 and 17 decide who's going to take the division, who's going to possibly be in a wild card situation. So you could easily see 3 playoff teams that are there next season. As Ronald Jones doesn't get hurt, Kuechly finds a fountain of youth. You could see a lot of things happen.
One little bonus topic: who is your pick right now for the Primer Super Bowl?
I think for the Primer Bowl, I think we got to go with Grams.
Mm-hmm.
As long as he does stay in his lane and with Lamar, I think sometimes he focuses too much on kind of proving that he can win with Lamar the passer as opposed to Lamar the complete player. And you have that full toolbox. Don't throw a couple out just because the stereotypical Lamar player is going to roll out, use the X factor abilities and scramble like crazy for 70, 80 yards a game. Like, don't be afraid to do that to win it, a Primer Bowl. I think, when I played him, I beat him. I think it was only one play the whole game where Lamar got out of the pocket. You can certainly win like that, but you are limiting you're making it a lot easier for the defense when you don't have to spy and contain every play, as a team with the defense with, worse talent. The Cardinals roster is not great. So it makes it a lot easier when you can just know you have a pocket passer back there the whole time.
Sure. I think we could have a Ravens-Saints Super Bowl, so we'll see what happens. Appreciate you guys tuning in for this primer edition of the podcast. Let us know what you want us to talk about. DM one of us what you want to see in the next show. What if you have some bitches or complaints, let us know on social chat or DM. We hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.